Nigeria and across the globe, SOUQ News TV is your #1 station focusing on business, economy, and development. With global digital reach, we connect Africa's pulse to the world stage. Welcome to SOUQ News Television, and here we go beyond the headlines, from breaking news, in-depth conversational programs, to market analysis and indices. From policies affecting growth to unique documentaries, from live event coverage to bespoke productions, we deliver content that connects you to the world. At SOUQ News Television, we provide news surrounding business, economy, and development, infomercials and jingles that stand out, short and long-form documentaries crafted to international standards, independent production spaces with full technical support, special coverage for individual and corporate events, a special form of documentaries through our prestige package, Immortals, where we tell your story the way you'd love it, and business support services tailored for small enterprises. SOUQ News TV, powered by FemWatch Limited, also home to the Isle 95.9 FM Lagos and Kasua 99.7 FM Kano, and Emirate News Television Abuja, together forming Africa's trusted media powerhouse. Storytelling, coverage, and connection that matters. SOUQ News TV, your home for business, economy, and development. At the Africa Development Studies Center, ADSC, we are committed to driving sustainable growth and development across Africa through innovative training and research. Our mission: empowering leaders, policymakers, and professionals with the tools they need to create lasting change. With customized training, dynamic research programs, and study exchanges on leadership, management, and other critical development topics, ADSC offers a platform for exchanging cutting-edge ideas and global best practices. We provide comprehensive services in research and consultancy, capacity building and training, education programs, publishing, and knowledge sharing. Our esteemed faculty, composed of seasoned experts and researchers, ensures a learning experience that is insightful and practical. We specialize in policy development, implementation strategies, monitoring, and evaluation. At ADSC, learning is engaging and enjoyable. Our unique methodology includes talks, interactive exercises, games, video screenings, and lively seminar discussions, all in a comfortable and friendly environment. Ready to make an impact? For more information, email us at info@adstudycenter.com or call +234 912 439 2362. Visit us today at www.adstudycenter.com to explore our programs and upcoming events. Africa Development Studies Center, rethinking development for Africa.
Fellow Nigerians, did you know that constituency and executive projects in your communities are not gifts from your legislators? They are projects sponsored by the legislators and funded by the federal government to improve your life and the lives of those around you. These projects belong to you. Without your vigilance, they might never be completed. Don't allow them to fade away into unfulfilled promises. Stand up, take ownership, monitor their progress, demand accountability, and report concerns to ICPC. Call our toll-free line now on 0800 2255 4272 or WhatsApp only on 0806 656 4726. This message is brought to you by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, with support from MacArthur Foundation and the Center for Democracy and Development in Africa, CDD.
When you visit Lagos for the first time and Google fun or recreational places in the city, at the top of that list will be Freedom Park. Located in Lagos Island on Broad Street, Freedom Park over the years has become home to the Nigerian arts and the culture at large. From annual big shows like the Lagos Theatre Festival, celebration at the Lagos Poetry Festival, to local festivals that celebrate literature, music, and arts. Freedom Park is one of the most visited recreational sites in Lagos for both local and tourist people alike. A place to mingle, unwind, or simply just have fun. Freedom Park, however, hasn't always been a place of fun and games. It has a history that dates to 1861, when Lagos was made a British colony. In 1885, Freedom Park was built as a fortified prison from imported bricks. It was referred to as Her Majesty's Broad Street Prison. Some prominent political prisoners were held in the prison, people such as Herbert Macaulay, Michael Imodu, and Obafemi Awolowo. In 1979, Her Majesty's Broad Street Prison was destroyed, reduced to a dumping ground. It was later rebuilt in the 1990s, celebrated in 2010, Nigeria's 50th Independence Day. Freedom Park still holds a bit of its history within its walls. In the museum, where there are pictures and artifacts. Some of the old prison facilities have been converted into leisure facilities that people visit and enjoy today.
Hello and welcome to Just Africa, the show where we explore forces shaping the continent's progress and the challenges that often go unnoticed. Despite boasting abundant natural resources, a growing middle class, and a dynamic youth population, Africa captures only about 3% of global foreign direct investment, that's FDI, because the continent's rhetoric of potential is misaligned, I beg your pardon, with realities of its governance, environment. Now, a New Democracy Institute poll shows that foreign investors, particularly Americans, are particularly deterred not by resource issues but by policy failures. Specifically, weak poverty rates, that's 34%, political corruption, which is about 20%, and burdensome regulations, that's about 12%. Now, to fix this, African governments must shift from merely selling potential to building confidence by prioritizing tangible reforms like strengthening judicial independence, reducing taxes, and tackling corruption, thereby creating predictable, legally certain environment that genuinely makes the continent bankable. This is Just Africa reaching you live from Lagos. I am Olumide Shokoya. Of course, I have Omevi Idola. So glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Olumide. Good afternoon to you, Lagos, Nigeria, and Africa at large. Welcome to Just Africa.
Yes, so we're looking at what, in as much as Africa has all the potentials, why are people not really coming in? I mean, if you look at the statistics I just read, you know, Americans are a bit deterred. So what do you think might be demarketing us? Yes, that's the word.
You know, you mentioned one thing. First of all, when we talk about Nigerian, African stories generally, most times, when the stories are not being told by Africans, the stories always start and ends with poverty. Yeah. That is what other people, that's the story most people tell about Africa. But you and I, who are Africans, we agree that our story doesn't start there, and our story does not also end there. There are things that makes Africa unique. And with the way it is going now, many people now believe that Africa is the new or the
new gold.
The new gold of destination for investment. People now believe that yes, Africa is the right place to invest because we have the population, we have the resources, both human and natural resources, and many other things. Now you were asking what is stopping investors from coming, and you mentioned one of them, which is poor policies. Yes, apart from that, then we have shifting taxes.
Yes.
You know, there was a time we had these conversations, and I said that when we are bringing tax laws, bring those policies that will be for, let's say, 5, 10 years.
All right.
Not changing those policies every now and then. It destabilizes investors. It destabilizes businesses. Then, of course, you know, in Africa, I hope we overcome that someday. We still have epileptic power supply. Until until the power in Africa is restored, we'll keep having challenges. That's why you see that most organizations, most companies, they decide to leave Africa to a place where they know that, okay, there's power supply, because the cost of production is high. So bringing power there is another one. So you can see that there are so many factors that are hindering. Of course, you see the state of our roads are really not there yet.
All right.
But notwithstanding, come on, we still have what it takes for investors to come into Africa, and we can do well, sure.
All right, so today's topic is Africa, the African attraction, opportunities and hindrances for foreign investors. Joining us to unpack this bold topic is Patrick Basham, Director of Democracy Institute. So glad to have you, Mr. Patrick Basham.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you so much.
All right, now, looking at your own survey suggests that many African leaders misunderstand what truly drives foreign investment decisions. What did the poll reveal?
Sure. Well, the bad news for African governments is that American investors see the problems as largely made in Africa. That means the good news is that Africans have a strong element of control over making their continent, their respective countries, more attractive to American investors. You know, for example, and of course, we're doing a poll. We did a poll on what American investors thought was encouraging or discouraging about African investment. But of course, Africa doesn't market itself as a foreign investment destination, as a continent. It markets itself on a country-by-country basis. So that actually is good news, more good news for African governments, because it means that they have far more control over their slice of Africa, their piece of Africa, their marketplace. They don't, you know, they can determine policies domestically and do not have to worry about what it is their neighbors, competitors. Well, they have to worry in the sense that they don't have to worry about them controlling their own policies. What they have to do is be aware at all times that in marketing themselves, they're not marketing their country in a vacuum. Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, etc., are marketing themselves vis-a-vis their competitors for those same foreign investment funds. So it's about making the Made in Africa brand more appealing. And it's about understanding that you not only have to make your own country as a brand more appealing, but you need to make it more appealing in comparison to your neighbors.
All right, so are you suggesting that African nations or African countries come together as one to market themselves rather than marketing themselves in individual nations?
I mean, in an ideal world, the continent could market itself as one marketplace, and there would be efficiencies. And if it was a strong marketing strategy, you could say hypothetically that would make most sense. However, Africa, like any other continent, made up of dozens of respective countries and economic and investment marketplaces, destinations. Realistically, that's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen in an efficient and effective way. Because what happens when individuals, groups, countries, businesses get together collectively to make strategic decisions? It tends to be decision making by committee, which means it's a sort of lowest common denominator type decision making. And it's something that everyone can tolerate, but no one's very enthusiastic about, which always, in this case, would guarantee Africa did not have an effective foreign investment attraction policy. So I think realistically, it needs to be country by country. But of course, not only, as I was saying, do you need to be more competitive, more attractive than your neighbor, but you can also learn lessons, good and bad, from what your neighbor and other countries in Africa are doing. Is another country excelling where you are not? And if so, well, There's no harm in copying what they're doing because, again, you control your domestic policies. Obviously, you do not control everything that's going, anything or certainly not a lot that's going on beyond your borders. You may have some influence diplomatically, etc. So focus on your domestic situation, domestic environment, and then build an appropriate and effective narrative about your country as a foreign investment destination. It's about telling a story. It's about telling an effective story, one that's more effective than your competitors are telling.
All right. Basham, I noticed that you kept mentioning the word competition, which means for you to compete, there has to be two people competing against each other. So which of the nations, I want to say Nigeria, do you see most competitive? Is it Nigeria and any other country, or which nations do you see have the strongest competition?
I think right now it is fair to say that Nigeria is probably doing the most effective job. I would also say, it's certainly in West Africa and arguably throughout Africa, I would also say that in terms of punching above their weight, pound for pound, to use that analogy, Ethiopia and Uganda are doing quite well, whereas countries like Kenya, for example, are punching, I would say, below their weight. South Africa, arguably, too. Because I go to a lot of investment conferences, and increasingly African government leaders and heads of states are invited to present and to make their pitch. And what happens, Kenya is a very good example of this. The Kenyan president will show up and he'll talk about all of the young people in this country and all of the resources, and therefore, invest in our country. Completely misunderstanding what foreign investors are looking for, because those foreign investors recognize that just about every African country you care to name has ample resources and a large young population. Obviously, the specifics vary, particularly in terms of the resources and the commodities. But they want to know other things. That it's not, those basics are a given or are necessary, but they're not sufficient to make the case to seal the investment deal. And so I think the Nigerian government, while not perfect in its marketing, I think is more effective. And as I say, in East Africa, Uganda and Ethiopia are doing comparatively well to, say, a neighboring country such as Kenya.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. And welcome to the show once again. Okay, so some people say that Africa doesn't have investment problems, that they have trust problems, actually. So from your data, how true is the statement?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I just didn't quite hear you.
Yes, some argue that Africa does not have investment problems, that investors are willing to come to Africa, they are willing to set up their companies here in Africa. But the problem is trust issues, that they have trust problems. So from the data, from the survey that you carried out, how true is the statement?
I think there's a great deal of truth to that. I think that the trust label is a neat and appropriate umbrella under which so many of the other specific issues that we identified in our poll, can rest quite comfortably or uncomfortably, depending on one's perspective. Yes, American investors are very open to investing in Africa. Fortunately, most of them are not looking for a singular hit-and-run experience. They want to be there for the medium to long term. And this is a good part of the reason why they are so focused on the made in Africa issues, the governance issues. So whether it's sort of financial and economic in terms of taxation, the level of regulation, those kinds of elements, or whether it's more on the governance side in macro terms, in terms of the level of political corruption, the transparency of the legal system, the extent to which property rights are protected. All of those, I think, can be labeled sort of trust-themed, trust-centered, trust-related issues. And so, yes, it's not a question of American investors not being interested in Africa. It's far more, as you suggest, a question of American investors distrusting Africa as an investment destination.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so you've talked about the leaders, what they need to do, but there are some truths that I think that some African leaders need to hear. when it comes to investment, bringing in foreign investors to Africa? What are those truths? Sometimes they really don't want to hear some of them because maybe they may not be comfortable with those truths. But what are those things that you think they need to hear to set the record straight for investors to come into Africa?
Well, there's one substantive and then one more stylistic truth. The substantive truth, I mean, I'm coming from a free market perspective, but I do think it's incredibly applicable to the foreign investment, question and dynamic. So we know from all the data, we know from history, that the greater economic freedom in a country, doesn't matter which continent it's on, overall you're going to have greater growth, greater wealth, less poverty, and actually eventually a better, more sustainable environment. So that encouraging as much economic freedom and less over-reliance on the government, on the state, means that domestically things will be better on their own, regardless of investment. But the good news is that there's a positive ripple on the pond, is that your more attractive, freer, more prosperous domestic marketplace will then be attractive innately, inherently, automatically, it will act as a magnet to foreign investors. So that's substantively, that's the truth, which is hard. It's hard for many governments in the West to appreciate these days, let alone, it doesn't matter of criticizing African governments, but African governments, I think, historically are less inclined to move in that direction. But stylistically, it's saying, okay, we've gotten our domestic economic, financial, and political house in better order. But how do we tell the world about, what's the kind of coat of paint that we need to put on it? What's the branding we need to put on it? And I think that is where many African governments fall flat. Their campaigns do, because they don't know how to brand themselves. They don't know, which investor markets are looking for which particular elements, or discouraged by particular elements. So, for example, this is a poll exclusively that we've just done of American investors. In the past, we've looked at investors from other countries, looking into other marketplaces, like, say, for example, Eastern Europe. And of course, where the investors are coming from and which continent or countries they're focused on are going to adjust this data naturally to some extent or another, sometimes significantly. So if we're looking, say, at European investors or looking at Asian investors, Middle Eastern investors, with tremendous potential for Africa, where some of the countries in East and West Africa are starting to leverage that opportunity, we will find different priorities. And so any African government that's branding itself has to recognize that you're not looking at a global environment. Yes, there are certain characteristics, preferences, which tend to be there generically, but you want to look at specific investor sources, by continent, by country, and what those specific investors are looking for, because it will vary by country and by continent.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much, Patrick Barsham. Now, in your opinion, what specific strength makes Africa attractive? The population, the resources, or is it something else?
Well, what we've found is that you might say it's all of the above. I mean, as a foundation, the young population is attractive. The natural resources are, of course, extremely attractive. But as I was touching on earlier, and as we found very much in our data from the poll, those are necessary perhaps to pique the interest of American investors. But American investors generally consider those to be a given. They have heard and are aware of them. And as I say, almost every African representative who speaks in an international platform on why they should be a recipient of more investment from the rest of the world always focuses on those. So what's important is sort of, what else can you do for me, right? Can you ensure that my investment is not going to be taken away from me at some point? If I have difficulties locally, domestically, with contractors or with employees, what is there? Is there a fair, reasonable legal process that I can count on? Is the system, is the judicial system that would govern any kind of dispute? Is it transparent? Right? These are really important things. And what is the infrastructure, for example? There are these tremendous resources. You have a good supply of labor. Here comes all this capital from America. What is the physical infrastructure? Is it in place? Can we help get it there, so that we can literally, figuratively, and literally, move our goods from the source, to market. All these sorts of things are so important. Am I going to? Obviously, everyone's investing because they want to make a profit. Hopefully, for the medium and long term, as I said earlier, not just for a quick, make a quick buck, as has happened unfortunately too often in the past. But to be confident, to have confidence in the African environment, you have to believe that, yes, the taxation level, you're going to pay tax, of course, but it's not going to be so onerous as to make you question at some point, why am I doing this? I'm employing all these people, I'm bringing all this money into the country, we're exporting all these goods, but I'm finding it very hard to sort of actually make any money out of this, which is going to disincentivize investors to sort of to stick with it. So these, it's these, as I was touching on earlier, these made in Africa elements, which are not the entire reason why an investor would or wouldn't move their capital to Africa. But as our poll indicated, they are certainly the majority of the reasons. Although, of course, what's happening, what may happen on the U.S. front in terms of trade and tariffs is certainly front of mind for many American investors today as well.
All right. I also forgot to mention, we've had a quite stable NPR, over the past couple of months. The NPR is about around 27%. Do you think that is attractive to foreign investors?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Whether it's Nigeria or another country, a region, whenever you can point to positive developments, positive trends, and especially trends that look like they're sustainable, then you have a leg up on your competition, and it's something that you need to stress, you need to emphasize. This is putting it crudely, this is a sales job, right? You're not knocking on somebody's door like an old-fashioned door-to-door salesman in the American context and saying, look what opening your coat and saying, look at these, beautiful watches, please buy one. But I wouldn't say there's a crudeness to it, but there's a simplicity to it in the sense that each country has to identify what its specific value-added elements or characteristics are, right? And they may be quite new, positive economic or financial data, news, experiences that can be pointed to, that can be demonstrated. They can also be, for example, on the educational front. As I say, we hear so much about the burgeoning youth population in most African nations. But are they also, as is the case in some countries, but not necessarily in all, are they better educated than their parents and grandparents? And is their education applicable and appropriate to the types of employment that foreign investors would be generating if they bring their capital to African country X or Y? Is there the skills training? It's one could be formally educated to a level that one's parents or grandparents, did not experience, were not fortunate enough to experience themselves. But does that mean you actually fit the employment needs, the skill set that potential investors are looking for? All of these things, if you can identify that, if you do have that going for you, and you can match it with a foreign investor, investors, investment community, then you need to stress that these are fundamental elements. that are necessary if you're going to do a better job in a comparative sense of selling your country vis-a-vis your peers.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. So from your survey, we found out that investors are very, very comfortable with a predictable environment where they know, yes, their businesses can thrive. And yet, the Africa economy is fast changing every day. So flexibility now, should we see it as another task, or they should see it as an advantage?
Sorry, these are the investors or on the African side?
Okay, so what I'm saying is this. Investors, they prefer an environment where the policies are predictable, where they know that, yes, the policies that are being made is in their favor, and they can predict what is going on. And they are not ready to change. That's what your survey shows. But the Africa economy, the African environment, the policies, they are changing every day. Now, should the investors see this flexibility as another task, or they should see it as an advantage for their businesses to thrive in Africa?
It's a great question. I mean, in terms of the answer, the devil's in the details. As you say, investors prefer predictable environments, they prefer stability. Just as domestically, people who invest in the American stock market on Wall Street, right? The one thing they like more than anything else is a stable financial and economic environment in America. That mindset is no different when many of the same individuals and institutions and companies look to invest overseas in Africa, for example. So yes, if the environment is already attractive, at least in terms of 1, 2, or 3 elements, then its stability, its predictability is going to be seen as advantageous. However, it isn't a given that as you correctly characterize, that evolving, trending environment, that's, if not chaotic, then at least churning, disruptive environment, which we see in more and more African countries economically and financially, that isn't necessarily disadvantage in terms from the perspective of American investors. It all depends on which direction the trends are heading. So further to what I was saying earlier, if you're economic or financial or educational or environmental or legal, judicial, political, if any, ideally all obviously, but if any of those trends are upward and they appear sustainable, there appears to be true momentum, be it financial, economic, political, behind them, then American investors are going to be able to put aside their default position of I want stability and predictability. I want to know what to expect, because they will recognize, at least the more entrepreneurial and the more far-sighted of them will recognize that if they move their capital now, the overall investment environment is going to improve, it is improving, it will continue to improve. And so the more, say, far-sighted of them will take advantage of that. Of course, not all investors are wise in all their investments. Not all of them make good decisions. So regardless of how well an African country may be doing and may present itself, it doesn't mean that every pitch is going to end in a yes. And end in a deal, because just as African governments are imperfect and flawed, American investors are imperfect and flawed as well. However, most of them have a good track record, and most of them will recognize, appreciate, and be incentivized by change in any given African country that appears to be sustainable and appears to be positive and appears to be a medium to long-term change.
All right, thank you very much. So, Patrick, most times when we talk about the challenges, the barriers for foreign investors to come down here to Africa to invest, most times the barriers the investors often see is corruption and bureaucracy. They don't see anything. So I want to ask, do the people and the culture of the African people, does it serve as an advantage to businesses, to foreign investors, or do they see it as a barrier?
Sorry, you said the culture or the
yes,
corruption?
Yes, the culture and the people.
Got the culture. I think the more exposure that American investors have sort of literally to African people, African culture, whether it's the African diaspora in, for example, America, which is extensive, or in country, in continent itself, I think generally that tends to make American investors more inclined to look seriously at investing. Many of them have had difficult experiences with African politicians, governments, the legal system, which is a lot of the reason why those issues can be such, that those elements can be such barriers. But African people themselves, their openness, sort of extrovertedness, willingness to learn, to do new things, to grow, to have new experiences, to gain education and skills. All of these things tend to make them on an individual level sort of quite welcoming, culturally welcoming to new ideas, new investment, new technology. You think of the various technologies where Africa has not only taken them on board from the West, but has often sort of made the running. I think about mobile payments, things like that, where certain African countries have been way ahead of many Western countries until quite recently. So while the bad news for many African governments is that the Made in Africa problem is one of their own making, literally of their own making, as politicians, as office holders, as policymakers, they and their predecessors. The good news for Africa is that the African people themselves are a net plus. What the African people need to do is to demand more of their governments, of their political leaders, their office holders, because they are the ones who, if their country is being held back, they're the ones holding the country back.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick Basham. From your global polling experience, how does Africa's perception among investors compare with regions like Southeast Asia or Latin America?
Well, I would say, in a comparative sense, Africa is, I think, overall not viewed as well, as attractively as some parts of Southeast Asia, but probably on a par with Latin America. I mean, the parts of the Middle East are seen these days as far more attractive, some parts of the Far East as well. But I think the important thing to sort of the takeaway from any such comparison is, again, looking at what other continents and countries, even if they're far afield, have done right and done wrong. And you say, take, for example, Southeast Asia, where a country like Vietnam, one or two others, are doing things on tax, for example, doing various things to make very tangibly, overtly, loudly make their countries more attractive in very bottom line terms to investors globally, especially American investors and Middle Eastern investors. So Africa is, while underinvested, should say 3% of global foreign direct investment is going there. While it's underinvested, clearly, the potential is huge, right? It's a man-made problem, but it can be overcome. It's a challenge that men and women in Africa can overcome, right? There's no innate obstacle or inherent reason why Africa must sort of be the poor continent of foreign investment. No reason whatsoever. Whether you look at the physical resources or the physical population, the people themselves, culturally, etc.
All right, Patrick, we'll go on a short break and we'll be right back. Just hold on.
Fellow Nigerians, did you know that constituency and executive projects in your communities are not gifts from your legislators? They are projects sponsored by the legislators and funded by the federal government to improve your life and the lives of those around you. These projects belong to you. Without your vigilance, they might never be completed. Don't allow them to fade away into unfulfilled promises. Stand up, take ownership, monitor their progress, demand accountability, and report concerns to ICPC. Call our toll-free line now on 0800 2255 4272 or WhatsApp only on 0806 656 4726. This message is brought to you by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission (ICPC) with support from MacArthur Foundation and the Center for Democracy and Development in Africa (CDD).
From Dubai to Lagos, Nigeria, and across the globe, SOUQ News TV is your #1 station focusing on business, economy, and development. With global digital reach, we connect Africa's pulse to the world stage. Welcome to SOUQ News Television, and here we go beyond the headlines, from breaking news, in-depth conversational programs, to market analysis and indices. From policies affecting growth to unique documentaries, from live event coverage to bespoke productions, we deliver content that connects you to the world. At SOUQ News Television, we provide news surrounding business, economy, and development, infomercials and jingles that stand out, short and long-form documentaries crafted to international standards, independent production spaces with full technical support, special coverage for individual and corporate events, a special form of documentaries through our prestige package, Immortals, where we tell your story the way you'd love it, and business support services tailored for small enterprises. SOUQ News TV, powered by FemWatch Limited, also home to the Isle 95.9 FM Lagos and Kasua 99.7 FM Kano, and Emirate News Television Abuja, together forming Africa's trusted media powerhouse. Storytelling, coverage, and connection that matters. SOUQ News TV, your home for business, economy, and development.
Welcome back to Just Africa. We're still on with Patrick Basham. Patrick Basham, so glad to have you on Just Africa today.
Great to be with you. I apologize, I can only be with you for a few more minutes. Even SOUQ News can't stop the plane from leaving on time.
All right, so before we let you go, Patrick, one final question. If you could advise African policymakers in one sentence, what must they do first to transform Africa from a high-risk to a high-return investment destination?
Of your own country, to improve the economic conditions of your people, and then devise an attractive narrative to sell that new reality to foreign investors.
All right. Thank you very much, Patrick Basham. Thank you for your insight, and thank you for joining Just Africa.
It's been my great pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we have been discussing the Africa attraction opportunities and hindrances for foreign investors with Patrick Basham, the Director of Democracy Institute. Thank you, Patrick Basham, for your thoughts and insight, and thank you for joining Just Africa. All right, Africa's story is one of potential, vast, complex, and unfolding. The challenge isn't just attracting investments, but channeling it towards inclusive, sustainable growth that uplifts the communities and builds resilience. We're going on a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the second segment of Just Africa. Stay tuned.
Afrobeats is a classic overnight success story, except it didn't happen overnight. I'm happy to be here. One of the key things about the Omniverse is that it's designed to go beyond an event and designed to be fully something that people can engage beyond the summit. The point being that Nigeria has so much to bring to the world in terms of these things, but we will be bringing fresh energy, fresh ideas, a fresh engagement, and we're obviously open to collaboration. But hip-hop, it never dies. What's the difference between Thor and Shango? Thor is approaching $50 billion in revenue. Shango's broke somewhere outside Lagos. And that's a lack of imagination on our part, Africa, and they're all Nigerian. So to be seen and to be noticed is very hard if you're not in the place where all the noise is being made.
Madagascar, the world's fourth largest island, stands as a geographical and ecological marvel of the southeastern coast of Africa. Isolated from the African mainland for over 80 million years, this island nation has evolved into a biological treasure trove found nowhere else on Earth. Over 90% of its wildlife is endemic, meaning it exists only in Madagascar, including the world-famous lemurs, baobab trees that look sculpted by myth, and an astonishing array of reptiles, insects, and plants. This extraordinary biodiversity has made Madagascar not only a focus of global scientific research, but also a symbol of nature's ability to evolve independently and richly. Beyond its natural wonders, Madagascar is home to a deeply diverse and culturally layered society. The Malagasy people trace their ancestry to both Southeast Asia and East Africa, making their culture a rare and fascinating fusion of traditions. This dual heritage is reflected in their language, rituals, architecture, and belief systems. The Malagasy language, derived from the Austronesian language family, is one of the few of its kind spoken on the African continent. This cultural hybridity also extends to cuisine, dance, and storytelling, blending African strength with Asian intricacy in daily life. Madagascar's history is equally distinctive. It developed powerful pre-colonial kingdoms, including the Merina Kingdom, which unified much of the island before French colonization in the late 19th century. Unlike many African countries, Madagascar experienced a relatively centralized monarchy before colonial rule. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, the country has navigated political instability, economic hardship, and natural disasters. Yet, it continues to strive toward democratic governance and sustainable development. Strategically located in the Indian Ocean, Madagascar is positioned as a crucial maritime node for trade, conservation, and regional diplomacy. Its economy, while heavily reliant on agriculture, fishing, and mining, is beginning to explore tourism as a sustainable development path. The island's unique biodiversity, combined with its warm hospitality and rich cultural heritage, makes it a compelling destination for ecotourists, adventurers, and scholars alike. In the face of deforestation, climate change, and poverty, Madagascar's story is one of resilience and irreplaceable natural wealth. It serves as both a warning and a wonder, reminding the world of what can be lost through neglect and what can be preserved through global cooperation and local stewardship. Madagascar is not merely another African country. It is an ecological arc, a cultural crossroads, and a national identity unlike any other on the continent. I'm Moyosore Adebiyi for SOUQ News TV.
Africa is a rich continent, and when it comes to African countries with hidden riches, Burundi is generally overlooked. This little East African nation, located between Rwanda, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, has a strong, distinct identity. Drums in Burundi do more than just generate sounds, they also convey stories. The royal drummers of Burundi, Abatimbo, are more than just performers. They are historians, keepers of traditions, and spiritual messengers. These gigantic drums, built from hollowed-out tree trunks and coated in animal hide, are regarded with respect. In reality, for centuries, they were only utilized for sacred rites, royal events, and national holidays. Here's what makes this unique. Burundi drumming is unofficially protected by UNESCO as part of the world's intangible cultural heritage. That is, the sound of the Burundian drum is not just a national icon, but also a global treasure. And they are not your typical beat makers. The ritual is ordered and ceremonial. Drummers perform while dancing, holding the drums on their heads and producing rhythm with their bodies rather than with their hands. It's poetry in motion, tradition in tempo. However, Burundi's rhythms are not limited to drums. There is also a rhythm to their agriculture. Over 90% of Burundians depend on agriculture, primarily for substance. Burundians know how to cultivate life, from coffee, the country's main exports, to bananas, beans, and sweet potatoes, even on limited territory. Despite decades of political unrest and economic challenges, the Burundian spirit remains resilient. Kingship, oral storytelling, and shared traditions are essential components of community life. There is an unsaid value in their community, as evidenced by their Ubushigante, a cultural council of wise elders who have traditionally helped settle conflicts and uphold moral standards. So, Burundi may be one of Africa's tiniest countries. It may not always make headlines. However, it embodies a continent's heartbeat through its drums, people, and Asia's customs. One that teaches us that even the smallest countries may echo the loudest truth if we only stop and listen. I am Laura Iheke for SOUQ News. Until next time, let's keep sharing stories that bring this continent together.
Welcome back to Just Africa, the program where we explore bold ideas shaping the continent's growth and its place in the world. Africa's creative economy is evolving through a new wave of designer researchers who merge creativity with data-driven insight to produce purposeful digital solutions. Professionals like Belu Ayomide exemplify this shift using design thinking and social research to develop brands, fintech tools, and real estate platforms that addresses real user needs. By combining innovation with evidence, these hybrid creatives are redefining designs as a force for social impact, positioning themselves at the forefront of Africa's digital transformation. Now, the topic for this segment is the rise of Africa's new generation of designer researchers. We'll go on a short break and we'll be right back.